A poor girl revives an elderly stranger, only to learn she's the billionaire CEO's grandmother. They said the old woman had 3 hours left. The doctors came, specialists came. One by one, they all shook their heads and left, white coats billowing like surrender flags, until the cleaner stepped forward. She didn't speak loudly. She didn't ask for permission. She just placed her mop against the wall, unzipped her canvas satchel, and pulled out a needle. Not plastic, not steel. Silver etched with symbols no one in that room could read. "You touch her and you'll be arrested," one of the doctors barked. The cleaner didn't flinch. "She's got 2 minutes left. That's enough time if you stop wasting it." They didn't move, but she did. She pressed her fingers to the woman's wrist. One breath, one motion, one ancient rhythm whispered beneath her pulse. Then, the monitor beeped. Once. Again. And then the old woman gasped. Outside the door, he watched. The man in the dark suit, the one with the trembling hand, the one who'd buried his love for her beneath years of silence and success. He stepped into the light. "Emma?" But she didn't turn. "Don't call me that," she said, barely a whisper. "You lost the right the night you chose them over me." McLean in the clear liner. Her aunt and she carried dust on her shoes and 5 generations of miracles in her blood. The cleaner who healed a dynasty. They called her a cleaner. Not to her face, of course. Never to her face. But Emma heard it in the way they looked at her, like dust in their sterile world of glass walls and name tags. She was the girl with the mop, the quiet shoes, the late-night shifts, the kind no one remembered seeing, even after walking past her for years. That morning had been no different. Floor 17, private ICU wing. The room at the end of the hall that smelled like money and something fading. The guards outside nodded to her with the same tired smile, non-threatening, forgettable. She stepped inside to mop up yesterday's footprints from the marble floor. Then the monitors began to scream. The old woman on the bed, Catherine Hale, convulsed once, then went still. Her skin had turned the color of cold wax. Nurses swarmed. One slipped, someone knocked over a cart, and then the room froze under the heavy silence of finality. One of the nurses whispered, "Get her grandson?" And Emma moved without thinking. She dropped the mop, pulled her satchel off her back, unzipped the hidden lining. Her fingers shook, just a little, as they wrapped around the silver needle wrapped in red cloth. The last thing her grandmother ever gave her. Not yet, she thought. Please, not yet. "Step aside," she said quietly, but no one did. A doctor snapped, "Who the hell are you?" Emma's eyes met his, calm, cold. "I'm the one who's going to try." She pressed her fingers to the old woman's wrist. The skin was ice, pulse nearly gone, breath absent. Still, Emma leaned in, and beneath all that silence, she listened. "The breath is not always in the lungs," her grandmother used to say. "Sometimes it hides in the bones." One swift stroke, needle to pressure point, another on the temple, a final one beneath the collarbone. But then she waited. The beep came seconds later, one small sound, trembling and soft. And then another. The old woman's chest lifted. Air hissed between her lips like she was waking from a long, hard sleep. A gasp, then a moan. "She's stabilizing," one of the doctors cried. But no one looked at him. They were all staring at Emma. Except for one man, who'd been watching her long before any of them. Long before she walked into that room. Long before she became the help. Richard Hale had stood outside that door since the moment the alarms went off. He hadn't moved. Not when they called time of death. Not when Emma stepped in. Not even when the monitor came back to life. Now he walked forward. She turned toward the door, wiping the blood from her fingers with the sleeve of her own uniform. Their eyes met. Something old flickered in hers. Something broken moved behind his. "Emma?" She looked past him, through him, and said, without a trace of softness, "Don't call me that." The doctor behind her stepped in. "Security will have to—" Emma raised a hand without looking. "You touch me, I stop the treatment. She'll crash within the hour." Silence fell again, heavier this time. Richard's jaw tensed. "What do you want?" Emma looked at him then. Really looked. "I wanted you to remember me," she said, "but you forgot the moment your father called me unsuitable. Now, I just want her to live." Behind her, Catherine's breathing steadied. Emma turned, picked up her mop and started walking. One of the guards tried to follow her. Richard stopped him. Let her go. The hallway swallowed her steps. The silver needle vanished beneath her coat. The whispers followed. But none of them knew what Richard knew. She hadn't changed at all. She still walked like silence had a sound. Still looked at the world like it owed her nothing, and yet she carried everything. 10 years ago, she vanished without a goodbye. No calls, no letters, not even that final look. Now she was back, not as his lover, not even as a woman he once knew, but as the only person in the world who could bring his grandmother back from death. And she wasn't asking for anything in return. Not love. Not money. Not revenge. Just a heartbeat. And Richard, who'd built an empire from steel and silence, suddenly couldn't hear anything over the pounding in his chest. He whispered to himself, almost a prayer. "God, what have I done?" Chapter 1. You're just the help. They didn't thank her. Not the doctors. The nurses. Not even the aide who'd accidentally knocked the tray of surgical tools off the counter and nearly tripped on the cord of the EKG monitor. They looked at her like she had broken some invisible rule. And like she'd cheated. Like saving someone without a license, without a title, was more threatening than letting someone die by protocol. Emma Wynne wiped her hands with a hospital paper towel and placed it in the bin marked hazard. Her uniform sleeves were still damp from the rain. A soft blood stain kissed the edge of her left cuff, a reminder that she hadn't hallucinated the whole thing. She'd brought Catherine Hale back from the brink. And now she was being escorted to the HR office by security. "You're not in trouble," the guard muttered without meeting her eyes. "They just need to ask some questions." Emma didn't nod, didn't flinch, just kept walking. It wasn't her first time being underestimated. It probably wouldn't be the last. But it stung, in a quiet, private way, like someone had poured ice water into her chest and told her to smile through the shiver. When she entered the conference room, it was already full. Richard Hale stood at the far end, his arms crossed, face unreadable. The chief medical officer was seated near him, along with 2 senior physicians and someone from legal clutching a tablet and trying to act like this was just another day. "Miss Wynne," the woman from legal began, "we just want to clarify a few things." Emma didn't. "I'm not signing anything," she said calmly. "We're not asking you to." The woman forced a smile. "We're just concerned about liability. You administered an unauthorized intervention. Technically speaking, that's I saved her life. Or Baba. She was clinically dead, flatlined for 34 seconds. The crash cart was still 2 minutes away. The attending physician had pronounced her. Emma's voice didn't rise, but it sliced through the room like a cold wind. "And you all froze, so I acted." One of the doctors cleared his throat. "Your background is unconventional. We'd like to understand how you knew what to do." Emma's gaze drifted to Richard. She hadn't moved, not an inch. Just stood there, staring at her like he was trying to solve a riddle he used to know by heart. She looked away. "My grandmother was a healer," Emma said simply. "So was her mother, and her mother before that. 5 generations. I didn't learn in a school. I learned by watching breath and bones in silence." The CMO scoffed under his breath. "Mrs. Wynne," the woman from legal pressed, "we're not trying to discredit your intentions. We simply need to understand your motivations." Emma studied her. "You think I poisoned her?" The woman blinked. "What? No." "You think I staged it, hurt her to save her, so I could look like a hero?" No one answered, which was answer enough. Emma exhaled slowly. I wanted power, she said. I wouldn't be pushing a mop for $13.50 an hour. The room stilled. Emma, Richard said finally, and her name on his lips did something strange to the air, like it belonged in a different decade. She didn't look at him. Don't. Can we speak alone? He hesitated. Please. Emma turned to the others. I'll wait outside. You can decide whether to fire me or thank me. Either way, I'm not explaining something your conscience already knows the answer to. She walked out before they could stop her. The hallway felt longer than it was. Maybe because it had been 10 years since she last saw Richard Hale's eyes up close. 10 years since that summer night in Vermont when he kissed her under the roof of an unfinished barn and promised he wouldn't forget. But he did. And she learned to stop believing men who kept their promises in whispers and broke them in boardrooms. Outside, the sun had started to burn off the rain, leaving steam rising from the asphalt like ghosts trying to escape the earth. Emma reached the back exit, punched out with a flick of her ID card, and walked toward the bike rack. Emma? She didn't stop. His footsteps followed anyway. Please, he said. She turned then. He looked tired, not older exactly, but thinner behind the eyes, like wealth had fed his bank accounts but starved something quieter in him. Why do you want Richard? He paused. The silence between them felt like something living. You saved her, he said softly. I didn't do it for you. I know. Emma looked past him toward the hospital windows. They think I hurt her. I don't. You didn't defend me. I couldn't. Not in that room. Not until I... She cut him off. You haven't changed. I have. No, she said. You've just gotten better at hiding. Richard stepped forward. Not close, just enough to feel real. He left without a word. You stayed silent when I needed one. They stared at each other. A decade unwinding in the space between two heartbeats. I looked for you, he said. Emma's laugh was soft, but it wasn't kind. You looked in all the places that mattered to you. Not one of them was mine. Richard's throat moved, but no words followed. Emma mounted her bike. If your grandmother crashes again, call 911. Not me. She turned the pedals once, twice, and was gone. Later that night, Richard sat in the dark corner of Catherine's recovery room. The monitors were steady, and her breathing soft. On the side table, a single silver needle gleamed in the low light, left behind like a signature. He picked it up, held it in his palm. His grandmother's voice broke the silence. She's the girl you let go, isn't she? Richard didn't answer. Albarabi, Norm, and Susie sat. But he didn't have to. Chapter 2. The Ring You Dropped. 2 days passed before she saw him again. Emma had gone back to her job like nothing had happened. She clocked in, swept the corridors, emptied bins with biohazard warnings, and avoided looking too long into... The hospital tried to be quiet about what happened. There were no public statements, no press leaks, just a new air in the ICU, heavy with something unspoken. And though no one said her name out loud, she noticed the way they stepped aside when she passed now. Not out of respect. Out of fear, awe, maybe, or confusion. They didn't know what to do with someone who didn't fit the script. That morning, she found the velvet box on her supply cart. No note, no initials, just a plain square, tucked behind a roll of medical tape and a bottle of diluted ammonia. She opened it, and forgot how to breathe. Inside sat a ring. Not just any ring. A ring? The ring. Twisted gold, old and soft-edged from wear. Inset with a single sapphire, no larger than a teardrop, the exact shade of her mother's eyes. Emma blinked hard. Memory hit like wind against glass. Vermont, 12 summers ago. A lantern-lit porch, her mother's laugh echoing through the trees. I wore this when I said yes to your father, she had whispered, slipping the ring onto Emma's thumb. "If you ever fall in love, real love, wear it. If he's the right one, he'll recognize it." It had gone missing the day her mother died. Emma had assumed she lost it in the chaos that followed. The fire, the relocation, the silence. She never spoke of it. Couldn't. The memory hurt too much to hold. And now here it was, sitting like a ghost in a velvet box on her cleaning cart. She didn't have to guess who. He waited for her on the rooftop, same place she had stood when Catherine Hale's life returned. The city stretched wide beneath them, wind stirring the corners of his coat. He didn't speak as she approached. Emma didn't touch the railing, didn't come too close, and she simply held the box up between them. "Where did you find this?" "I never lost it," Richard said. Her fingers curled. "You kept it?" "I picked it up from the porch steps the morning you disappeared." Her breath caught. "You knew it was mine?" "I knew," he said quietly. "Well, you kept it?" "Only 10 years, he replied. "In a drawer I never opened, in a house I never lived in." Emma looked away, the sky suddenly too wide. "I thought it burned. I searched that night, after they took my mother." "I was there," Richard said, "at the fire. They wouldn't let me through." "Your father did that," she said. "He told them I was no one." Richard didn't deny it. "I was 17, he said, and I believed that loving someone meant staying silent when it got hard." Emma laughed, sharp, tired. "It's not love if it can't survive a name." "I know that now." "Richard, you don't get to know it now. You should have known it then." The wind kicked up around them, stirring the edges of memory. "I didn't come for apologies," she said, "or closure, or any of the things men like you offer after years of silence." Eliza did, at first calmly. Emma met his eyes. For a moment she looked like the girl he used to know, all fire and refusal. "Because that woman in the bed mattered to me. Because your grandmother once held my mother's hands when she was hemorrhaging in a shelter in Memphis and stayed until the bleeding stopped. Because your grandmother saved my mother's life." Richard swallowed. "You knew?" Until I saw her face," Emma said. "But when I did, I knew. The old nurse in the torn coat, the one who hummed Nina Simone while stitching wounds, it was her." Richard stepped closer. "Just once." "She'd be proud of you," he said. "I'm not yours to be proud of." He didn't answer. Emma placed the box on the ledge between them. "Next time you want to return something," she said, "have the decency to do it in person." "I'm doing that now." Emma stared at him. "You had that ring all this time, and you waited until I walked back into your world to give it back?" "I didn't know how to find you." "You didn't try?" she said. And just like that, the moment cracked. Emma turned to leave. Richard reached out, not to stop her, but to place something in her hand. She looked down. It was a photograph. Little edges, a little bent. 2 kids in a summer dusk. Her, barefoot in a cotton dress, grinning up at him like she didn't know heartbreak yet. Him, shirt half untucked, his hand near hers but not quite touching. He stood and seen it in years. "You carried this?" "Everywhere," he said. She didn't know what to say. So she just walked away? Not running, not rushing, but gone. Later that evening, Emma sat cross-legged in the corner of her small apartment, the photo in one hand, the ring in the other. Outside, Chicago groaned under its own weight: traffic, sirens, wind. Inside, it was quiet enough to remember the exact tone of her mother's voice. "While he's the right one, he'll recognize it." But maybe that wasn't the whole message. Maybe it wasn't about him recognizing the ring. Maybe it was about her recognizing herself. Not as the girl who once waited under a summer porch, but as the woman who chose herself when no one else would. Emma closed the box gently. Then she slipped the ring back onto her finger. And didn't cry. Not once, Chapter 3. Not fit for the boardroom. They didn't want her there. Emma knew it before she walked into. She saw it in the way the receptionist flinched when she gave her name. Hale Technologies was made of glass and steel and silence. The kind of place where shoes didn't squeak, and every woman wore the same shade of ambition in her lipstick. She didn't belong, and they all knew it. The assistant said stiffly, "The board is waiting." Emma said nothing, just nodded once and stepped into the lion's mouth. The boardroom was too large for 10 people. The chairs looked like they cost more than her annual salary. A bottle of imported water stood in front of each seat, untouched, as though even thirst. 9 men, 1 woman, all of them wearing expressions that ranged from skeptical to vaguely amused. And at the head of the table, Richard Hale. He stood when she entered. "Emma," he said, softer than before, "thank you for coming." And she didn't answer, just pulled out the nearest chair and sat. No handshake, no greeting, no preamble. A man in a gray suit coughed into his fist. "We should thank our lucker," I said. "I suppose we should begin." Richard gestured. Emma has been invited to consult on the new Haytech Wellness Initiative, her background in integrative healing. "Forgive me," interrupted a man down the row, "but what background exactly?" Richard paused. "She's trained." "On what precisely?" another chimed in. "We're a tech company, Richard, not a summer camp." Emma's fingers stayed still on the table, but her spine straightened. "I'm not here to play nice," she said. "I was invited to consult on the failures in your wearable health data systems, not to explain why I'm not wearing Prada." One of the men chuckled, another looked away. The only woman on the board scribbled something on a legal pad without lifting her head. Richard cleared his throat. "Emma has experience with biofeedback treatment." "I brought a woman back from death," she said flatly, "using a technique your medical advisors still can't explain. I didn't come here for a paycheck. I came because your grandmother asked me to." That made the room go still. The man in gray frowned. "You referring to Miss Catherine Hale?" "You were her what, caretaker?" Emma met his gaze. "I was the only person in the room who didn't stand there and watch her die." Silence. Richard tried to steer the conversation. "Emma's insights could help us develop a more human-centric approach to the platform, bridging real-time analytics with personalized sensory therapy." The woman finally looked up. "That's poetic, Richard, but we build scalable products, not folk remedies." Emma stood. This was a mistake. Richard stood too. "Emma?" "No," she said. "You wanted me in this room so you could prove something. Maybe to yourself, maybe to them. I don't care." She turned to the board. "You want someone to make your algorithm feel like empathy? Hire a PR firm. But if you want to build something that doesn't fail people the way your hospitals have, start by asking what pain sounds like to someone who lives with it." She stepped back from the table. "And, for the record, I didn't come here to change the way you see me. I came to see if any of you were still worth seeing." She walked out. No one stopped her. Except Richard. He caught up to her by the elevator. "Emma, please." She turned to face him. Her eyes weren't angry, just tired. "I thought maybe it was different now, that after everything, you might have learned how to hold a door open instead of holding a position." "I didn't know they'd respond like that." She laughed, low and bitter. "Of course you did." Richard said nothing. "I'll finish what I promised your grandmother," she said, "but after that, I'm done." The elevator opened. Emma stepped in. Richard didn't follow, but just before the doors closed, she added, without looking back, "You stood in front of them, Richard, but you never stood for me." He didn't sleep that night. Not because of the board. He was used to their condescension. They'd questioned his every decision since the day he took over after his father's sudden stroke. No, it was her voice that kept ringing in his head. "You never stood for me." He poured himself a drink he didn't finish, stared at the ceiling for hours, and finally, around 3 o'clock a.m., he drove across the city to Catherine's house. She was awake. She always was, these days. "I heard you called a meeting," she said without looking up from her knitting, "and scared off the only person in that room with a soul." She's not just. I know exactly who she is. Richard sat down. I tried to explain. Catherine looked at him then. Old eyes, clear as glass. "Sweetheart, you tried to manage her." Richard blinked. "You brought her into the boardroom so she could perform, not speak. You wanted her there, but not equal. You don't get to make her small." "I didn't mean to." "You did." Catherine leaned back in her chair. "She doesn't need your protection, Richard. She needs your honesty. And you've been hiding from that woman since the night she disappeared." He didn't respond. "Go to bed," she said. "You're no use to anyone while you're still pretending to be the man." Emma walked the city at dawn, side to West Loop, past shuttered cafes and silent laundromats. She counted breath, not steps. The wind was sharp. It didn't bother her. Her phone buzzed at 6:13. IMN. Text, from a number she didn't recognize. "I was wrong. You didn't break in. You walked in, and they broke themselves trying to understand you." She didn't respond. But she saved the message. Not because it changed anything, but because, somewhere inside the ache, she wanted to believe there was a version of him that could change. Maybe not for her, but for himself. Chapter 4. The Heartbeat. Catherine insisted Emma stay for dinner. "I don't need a nurse," she said. "I need someone in the room who isn't pretending I'm already dead." The house was warm, not in temperature, but in spirit. Old rugs that looked like they'd traveled continents. Books piled in corners like they'd wandered away from their shelves. A fire crackled in a stone hearth, and something about it reminded Emma of her mother's last apartment, the one with the broken radiator and second-hand curtains that danced every time the wind got through the cracked windows. Emma said yes, just for the night. Catherine didn't ask questions, not about her skills, not about her past, not about the rumors floating around the hospital that the cleaner had saved her with something between magic and madness. Instead, Catherine poured tea and told stories. "Did I ever tell you how I met Richard's grandfather?" "No," Emma said softly. "We stationed in Saigon. I was there with the Red Cross unit. First thing he said to me was, 'You're going to ruin me.' And I did." Emma smiled. A real one, small, careful, but real. Catherine noticed. "Used to smile like that in the garden," she said. Emma paused. "I didn't remember your face, not right away," Catherine said. "But when I woke up, I remembered the feeling. There was a girl, long ago, who used to visit the clinic in Memphis, sat outside under the tree with her mother, drawing patterns in the dirt while she waited." Emma's throat tightened. "I didn't put it together until I heard your name. Win, like the woman who sang lullabies in Vietnamese when she thought no one was listening. But with my mother." Catherine nodded. "I taught her how to stop a nosebleed with pressure to the brow bone. She taught me how to make rice porridge with ginger when you can't keep anything down." The room fell quiet. "She kept you alive," Emma said. "She gave me back something I didn't know I'd lost." They sat with that truth between them. Two women, decades apart, tied by a single act of kindness, a bowl of soup, a lesson in bleeding, a hand held on a cold night. Later, after tea, Catherine pulled a stethoscope from the drawer beside her chair. "Help me," she said. "I want to hear it again." "Hear what?" "My heart." Emma tilted her head. Catherine smiled. "It was gone, you know. For 34 seconds, no beat, just silence." Emma walked over, slipped the earpieces in, placed the bell gently against Catherine's chest. "Lub-dub. Lub-dub. Steady. It's there," she whispered. "Are you listening with your ears or with your fingers?" Emma looked up. "My grandmother used to say," Catherine murmured, "the body always whispers before it screams. You have the gift, don't you?" Emma hesitated. "It's not a gift. It's just memory. A long line of women who never had time to write it down. Well, Catherine said, you saved me with it. That's enough for me. Richard didn't come home that night. He called, briefly, said he was tied up at the office. Catherine said nothing, just hummed and hung up. You should know, she told Emma. He was a quiet boy, always wanted to fix things, but never the loud kind, not like his father. Emma said nothing. Used to sit outside with your mother when he was little. Asked her if love could cure pain. She told him no, but she said it made the pain worth surviving. Emma's eyes stung, unexpectedly. She said that? Catherine nodded. He never forgot it. I don't think he's ever stopped looking for proof. That night, Emma slept in the guest room. She didn't plan to, hadn't even brought a change of clothes, but sleep came heavy. For the first time in years, she didn't hear sirens or shouting outside her window. Just the steady beat of a grandfather clock and the soft creak of the house settling into its bones. She woke once, near dawn, to the sound of footsteps. The door cracked open. Richard stood in the hall. He didn't speak, just looked at her, like he didn't expect to find her there, like her presence both calmed and unraveled him. Emma pulled the blanket closer. What do you want? He didn't step inside. Are you staying? He asked. Or now? His shoulders dropped slightly. He nodded once, then turned to leave. Before he disappeared, she said quietly, You used to listen to my mother sing. He stopped. She said you believed in soft things, like lavender and fireflies and forgiveness. Richard didn't look back, but his voice reached her through the dark. I still do, he said. I just forgot how to say it out loud. The next morning, Emma stood at the kitchen counter, hands wrapped around a chipped mug. She didn't drink the coffee, just held it like a memory she wasn't ready to let go. Catherine sat at the table, reading a newspaper she hadn't cared about in years. Richard entered, suit pressed, eyes tired. Emma didn't say good morning, neither did he. But before he left, he paused by the door. I rearranged the board. Emma looked up. I'm giving you full access to the wellness project. I removed 3 members who objected. You didn't have to do that. I know, he said, but I wanted to start somewhere. Emma nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet. But a beginning. She glanced down at her mug and realized her hand wasn't shaking anymore. Chapter 5. The Woman in the Shadows. Emma didn't knock. She rarely did anymore. Catherine had asked her to return for the weekend, said something about a small design consult for the healing wing of the Hale Foundation's new community clinic. But Emma knew better. The invitation wasn't for her skills. It was for her presence. Richard opened the door himself. You're early, he said, stepping aside. Emma walked past him into the hallway. The scent of old wood, lavender, and fresh coffee filled the air. I didn't know it was a formal invitation. He smiled, barely. If it were, I would have lost the courage to send it. They stood in the foyer like 2 people caught between the past and the present. Her hands stayed at her sides. His were in his pocket. Catherine's in the garden, he said. She said you'd know where to find her. Emma nodded and moved toward the rear patio. But just before she reached the French doors, she paused. Her reflection flickered in the glass, a woman shaped by silence and survival, carrying 5 generations of forgotten medicine in her bones. She turned back. So I now, Richard. He looked up from the hallway table where he'd been flipping through donor reports. Why do you mean? She stepped closer. You've had 10 years. 10 years to say something, ask something, return the ring, apologize. He exhaled slowly. I wasn't ready. Ready for what? The answer I didn't want to hear. Emma didn't blink. I wasn't the one who needed to answer, Richard. You were. A pause. Then she stepped outside. Catherine sat under the pergola, her lap covered in a faded quilt, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "I knew you'd come," she said without looking up. Emma smiled gently. "You always know." Catherine pointed toward the flower bed near the fountain. "He's planting them again." "Lavender?" "Mukagala," said the scent reminded him of peace. Emma crouched beside the raised bed, soil soft beneath her fingers. The air carried that familiar, bittersweet fragrance, like something half-remembered and wholly needed. "He used to watch you, you know," Catherine said softly. Emma didn't answer. Like the others, not like his father. Richard watched with curiosity, with a kind of reverence, but when you left, he folded into himself, like something he'd been protecting finally disappeared. Emma pressed her hands into the soil. It was cool, damp, forgiving. "I didn't leave to hurt him." "I know." "I left because no one would have believed me, if I stayed." Catherine nodded slowly. Emma said nothing. A single bee hovered near the lavender, then darted off. "Will you still love him?" Catherine asked. Emma looked at the wind stirring the leaves above them. "I never stopped." Inside, Richard stood just out of sight. He didn't mean to listen, but he couldn't turn away. Her voice hadn't changed. It was still quiet, still sure, still carried the weight of someone who'd never been given permission to be loud. And yet, she'd always filled the room. Even now, just hearing her speak filled something in him he didn't know had emptied. He stepped back, out of view, as Emma rose from the garden. She walked through the side path toward the studio at the back of the property. The same one Catherine had converted into a healing arts center, and the same one Emma had helped design years ago before she disappeared. The door was unlocked, dusty, sunlit in that golden late afternoon way. Emma stepped inside. Space hadn't changed. The same old books on breathwork and bone alignment, the same white linen curtains drifting in the breeze, and on the table near the east window, a sketchbook. Her sketchbook. The one she'd left behind. Emma opened it. On the first page, faded pencil marks, a heart, drawn not anatomically but as a rhythm, a pulse, a memory. Her finger traced the edge of the page. There were coffee stains on the corner, and a single note in handwriting that wasn't hers. "I should have stayed." She closed the book. "I thought you burned it," she said quietly. Richard stood in the doorway. "I couldn't." She didn't face him, just kept her eyes on the sketchbook, still closed in her lap. "You kept the ring, the picture, the book. Why all the remnants, Richard? Why save the pieces if you weren't willing to fight for the whole?" He took a breath. "Because I was a coward." She turned. "That again." He didn't hesitate. "I was a coward." There it was, the honesty she'd waited a decade for. "I thought protecting the life I was handed meant sacrificing the one I wanted, and then I convinced myself you didn't want me back." Emma studied him. "You were wrong." "I know." Silence fell between them again, but it wasn't the sharp kind. It was the quiet between waves, heavy, necessary. "I'm not here for a reunion," she said. "I'm here because your grandmother believed in healing what the world gives up on, and because I believe that legacy is worth continuing." He nodded. "I'm not asking for a reunion," he said. "I'm asking for a chance to become the man who would have deserved you then." Emma blinked. The room felt smaller suddenly, or maybe it was her heart unfolding long after it had taught itself to stay shut. "Can't fix the past, Richard." "I don't want to. I want to honor it." Emma closed the sketchbook and stood. "I don't need your apologies." "I know. I need your action." He nodded again. "Then let me build something that remembers you were here, not quietly, not hidden, but centered." And she stared at him, then handed him the sketchbook. Chapter 6. Anatomy of a Betrayal. It was called a gala, but it felt like a test. The Hale Foundation's winter benefit was held every December in the Astoria Hotel's glass ballroom, the kind of place where the ceiling disappeared into chandeliers and the floor gleamed like frozen water. Everyone who mattered in Chicago came, and everyone who came wanted to matter more. Emma almost didn't attend. But Catherine had asked. Again, "Don't show up for me," she said. "Show up for yourself. You've saved my life, now let them see what that life is worth." So Emma said yes. She wore a navy. Not black, not white, something in between. Her mother's ring on her finger, her hair swept back in quiet defiance. No heels, no borrowed diamonds, just herself. When she entered the ballroom, conversations paused just for a moment. Heads tilted, voices lowered. She felt it like wind in a tunnel, attention sharpened by discomfort. Richard was already there, standing near the stage with his back to her, dressed in midnight charcoal. He looked like he belonged in that world. She'd always known he did. She walked past him without stopping. Let him feel what it was like to be the one unseen. The speeches dragged, as they always did. Board members congratulating one another. A live auction for a signed baseball that somehow symbolized community outreach. Richard gave a brief address about the launch of the Hale Health Initiative, the very project Emma had redesigned from the inside out, but her name wasn't mentioned. Not once. And that was the first crack. Catherine caught her eye across the table, raised an eyebrow. Emma gave a subtle shake of her head. She didn't need a microphone to know her worth. But still, it stung. After the applause faded and the room began to stir with champagne and mingling, Emma slipped toward the corridor. She didn't want to be seen leaving, she just needed air. That's when she heard it. "She's not even certified, you know." The voice was sharp, female, expensive. Emma slowed, staying just out of sight behind a column. She was a janitor, at Hale Memorial. You'd think Richard would aim higher, but I guess even CEOs get lonely. Another woman laughed, low and cruel. "I heard she used herbs." "Herbs? What is this, 1812? Did she light incense and chant too?" "Honestly," the first voice continued, "if she weren't so pretty, no one would be pretending she saved anyone. And then none. We still loves her, you know. That's the real scandal." Emma stepped forward. The women turned, startled. She didn't raise her voice. "I don't mind being underestimated," she said, "but if you're going to insult me, at least do it loud enough to own it." The first woman blinked. "I'm sorry." "No, you're not," Emma said calmly. "You're just used to women like me staying quiet, uncredentialed, uninvited, unwelcome." She glanced at the second woman. "I didn't save Catherine Hale because I wanted a seat at your table. I saved her because she was dying and I could help." Silence. Emma let it stretch long enough to sting, and turned and walked away. Behind her, one of the women muttered, "She really thinks she belongs here." Emma didn't stop this time. She just whispered to herself, "I never did, but I'm here anyway." Richard found her in the hallway 15 minutes later. "I saw you leave." She didn't turn. "Did you?" "I'm sorry," he said. "Why what?" "Not mentioning you. In the speech." She faced him. "You didn't forget, Richard. You chose not to." He said nothing. Emma stepped closer, her voice low. "You're building a wellness platform off the back of my work, using my designs, my philosophy, my language, and when the lights came up, you spoke about innovation, vision, future. You said all the right words except one." She pointed to herself. "Me." "I didn't want to make you a target," he said quietly. "You know how they are." "I'm not afraid of them," she said. "I'm afraid of disappearing again, of letting people like you erase people like me, one silent omission at a time." He reached for her hand. She didn't let him take it. "You said you wanted to become the man who could deserve me," she said. "Then start by saying my name when it counts." And she walked away. Again. But this time, it wasn't to run. It was to reclaim. Catherine called a press conference the next morning. Richard didn't know about it until it was already live on 3 local networks and trending online. She sat at a long table in her own living room, a hand-stitched scarf around her neck, and fire in her eyes. "I'm not dead yet," she said to the cameras, "but when I almost was, it wasn't the hospital that saved me. It wasn't the protocols. It wasn't the machines. It was a woman." She held up a photo, not from a gala, not from the hospital, but from Emma's childhood. A grainy image of a little girl holding a homemade stethoscope, sitting on the lap of a woman with gentle hands and quiet eyes. Her name is Emma Wynne, and she carries 5 generations of healing in her hands. She didn't learn from textbooks. She learned from blood, breath, bone. "If you trust me," Catherine said, "then trust her." "I do." By noon, the media wanted interviews. By evening, the board called an emergency. By midnight, Emma's name was on every healthcare outlet's front page. She didn't say a word. Not until Richard showed up outside her apartment, soaked from rain, holding an umbrella he never opened. "I was wrong," he said. Again. She let him in. He stood in her tiny kitchen like a giant who didn't know where to put his hands. "I keep trying to protect you from a world that doesn't deserve you," he said. "But maybe the world's not the problem. Maybe I am." Emma poured tea. 2 cups, no sugar. "I don't want a protector, Richard." He nodded. "I want a partner." Another nod. "I want my name on the door." He looked at her. "You'll have it." She slid the mug toward him. Let their fingers brush, just briefly. When they ask who designed the future of healing, she said, "You'll tell them." "I will." "We'll say it clearly." "I will." "You'll say it proudly." "I will." She sipped her tea. It was still too hot, but she didn't care. Fires were meant to be held. Chapter 7. The Patient Files. The file wasn't supposed to exist. It had no barcode, no record in the Hale Memorial database, no initials on the tab, just a worn brown folder thick with age tucked behind 2 rows of misfiled oncology records in the sub-basement archive. Emma found it by accident. She'd gone downstairs to find old blueprints for the community clinic project. The architecture team said the originals were in cold storage back when records were still kept on paper, and people thought steel doors could keep secrets buried. She didn't recognize the handwriting on the front of the file, but she recognized the name inside it. Lean Wynne. Your mother. Emma's breath caught. The first page was a standard hospital intake form. Name, age, symptoms, persistent fever, unexplained weight loss, bruising. Diagnosis, unconfirmed autoimmune complications. She turned the page. Old progress notes. Lab results. Then, a typed memo, dated 12 days before her mother's final hospital stay. Patient has responded unexpectedly well to non-standard treatment protocol. Recommend temporary pause of trial medication pending further evaluation. Initialed, R.H. Emma blinked. Her fingers trembled. Richard's father, Randall Hale. Emma sat down hard on the metal stool behind her, the cold of it grounding her in the moment. She kept reading. In the margins of a lab result. Note similarities with CH. Elevated enzymes consistent with suppressed immune response. C-Hub. Catherine Hale. Emma's mind began to spin, not with panic, but with focus, precision, pattern recognition. The same symptoms, the same experimental protocols, decades apart. And both women silenced. Catherine with an unexplained collapse. Her mother with an unexplained death. Emma's jaw clenched. This wasn't coincidence. This was lineage. She brought the file to Catherine the next, spread the pages out like puzzle pieces on the quilt in her lap. Catherine read in silence. Her fingers brushed over her own name like it didn't belong to her anymore. When she reached the final page, the memo about the unauthorized drug hold, she stopped. I remember this, she said softly. You do? Oh. Catherine nodded. I was on a trial for an autoimmune reversal therapy. They told me it was cutting edge, promising. I started feeling better, then worse. Much worse. Then nothing. Like my body had shut down all at once. Did you know my mother was in the same trial? 9, Catherine said. But I should have. She looked up. I should have seen it. Emma's voice didn't shake, but it was close. Your son knew. Catherine closed her eyes. No, not him. He was already overseas when the board brought the research arm in-house. You're sure? Catherine nodded. Emma gathered the pages back into the folder, slower now. I think this wasn't just about testing new drugs, she said. It was about eliminating variables, silencing people who didn't produce the right outcomes. You think your mother was a liability? She was a woman of color in a trial that didn't want complexity. She got better in ways they couldn't explain, so they stopped explaining. Catherine looked down at her own hands. You tried to erase her, just like they tried to. Emma nodded. I'm not letting them succeed. That night, Richard came home to find Emma already there. The lights in the study were dimmed. The file sat open on the desk. You kept notes, she said without looking up. He closed the door gently behind him. I didn't know what they meant, he replied. They're in your father's handwriting. I know. You let him build a hospital on a foundation of buried lives. Richard stepped forward. Slowly. I was 22. He gave me the keys, said I could build something real. I didn't know there were bodies beneath the floor. Emma turned to face him. What you do? He didn't speak? She held up a page, the one with his father's initials. She died because someone thought data mattered more than dignity. I'll fix it, he said. Emma's eyes burned. Don't fix it for me. Fix it because it should have been done 20 years ago. I will. She looked at him, then really looked. You say that a lot, Richard, but words don't resurrect the dead. I'm not trying to resurrect the past, he said. I'm trying to make sure no one else gets buried by it. The next morning, Emma returned to the hospital. She didn't wear her uniform, didn't carry her mop. She walked straight into the director's office with a copy of the file and asked for a meeting with the ethics board. They gave her 5 minutes and spoke for 10. And when she finished, she placed the last page of the report in the center of the table. Unresolved discrepancies in patient outcomes. Further investigation recommended. Silence followed. Then one of the physicians leaned forward. Why are you asking us to do? Look again, she said, at the numbers, the names, the gaps in the records, and then do what should have been done the first time. He looked at her. You're not afraid of bringing all this out into the open? Emma shook her head. I'm afraid of letting it stay in the dark. Later, alone in Catherine's garden, Emma sat on the bench beneath the sycamore. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her mother's voice lived in the wind, in the lavender, in the sound of her own heartbeat, steady now. Steady like the hands that taught her how to listen. This wasn't revenge. This was reclamation. And she was just getting started. Chapter 8. The Dynasty Falls. It was the first time Emma had ever stepped inside the Hale Technologies shareholder floor, not as a shadow, not as an unseen force behind a product, but as herself. No badge, no uniform, just her name. And they couldn't ignore her anymore. The private shareholder summit was called under urgent pretenses, officially to discuss public backlash after Catherine Hale's press statement. Unofficially, it was about Emma. About the file. About what they'd buried, and what she'd pulled back into. She entered the hall alongside Richard, but 2 steps behind. On purpose. Not out of deference, but to prove a point. She didn't need to lead his revolution. She'd built her own. The room was packed. Suits, investors, legacy names that had shaped the skyline for decades. And at the head of the table, Randall Hale. He was grayer than Emma remembered, thinner. But the presence was the same, like frost on a window pane that never quite melted. "Richard," Randall said, nodding, "and your guest." "This is Emma Wynne," Richard said clearly, "the architect of our wellness initiative, and the reason your mother is still alive." A hush fell. Randall's mouth barely moved. "That's not how it was explained to me." Emma stepped forward. "Then let me explain it now." A few heads turned. Someone shifted in their chair. Randall's voice sharpened. "You don't have the floor." "I have the evidence," Emma said, placing a stack of bound documents on the table. "And I have the truth, which for once is going to speak louder than legacy." The board members exchanged looks. Randall didn't blink. "You come into this room like a crusader, but all I see is someone who doesn't understand how this world works." Emma didn't flinch. "I understand exactly how it works. It builds cathedrals out of privilege, then nails the doors shut when people like me try to enter." Randall leaned back, fingers steepled. "And you think burning it down will change anything?" "No," she said, "but naming what's buried beneath it might." Richard stepped forward. "She has proof that the autoimmune trials your administration approved were manipulated. That outlier patients, including Emma's mother, were deliberately removed from the data pool to preserve funding." Randall's voice dropped a note. "Watch what you're accusing me of, son." Emma slid the memo across the table, the one with his initials. "This says enough." A long silence, broken only by the hum of the central air conditioning and the slow, collective realization. Randall glanced down at the paper and looked at Emma. "I did what I had to do." Emma's jaw tightened. "See, my mother showed up, trusted you. She died anyway." Randall didn't respond. One of the younger board members cleared his throat. "We should open the floor." Richard stepped to the front. "My father built this company on order, efficiency, and discipline. But what it needs now, what the world needs, is accountability." He turned to Emma. "It's partnership." More silence. Then another voice, older, this time, one of the legacy investors. "Do you intend to step down, Randall?" Randall stood, slowly. "I intend to protect what I built." "I intend to lead it somewhere new," Richard said. "Starting today, I'm requesting a formal vote of confidence from the shareholders regarding leadership transition." Emma's. Randall's eyes narrowed. "You've planned this." "No," Richard replied. "Emma did. I just finally listened." The vote didn't take long. By a narrow but decisive margin, Randall Hale was removed from the day-to-day board authority. Richard was instated as full CEO. Emma watched as Randall left the room without another word. The door didn't slam, but the dynasty cracked. Outside, Richard didn't say anything at first. Neither did Emma. They stood in the sunlit marble lobby as security and reporters moved like slow tides. And finally, he looked at her. "You didn't have to come." "Hurry," Felicia said. "I did." "Why?" Emma met his eyes. "Because if I didn't, I'd still be fighting your father's ghost. Now I get to fight the future instead." He exhaled. "You know you could run this place." She shook her head. "No." "I know." "I'm not here to replace power," she said. "I'm here to rewrite what it means." A pause. "Then what do you want?" Emma's voice softened. "I want a seat at the table that I build myself." Later that night, she returned to Catherine's garden. The wind was gentle. The air smelled like lilacs and ash. Catherine was waiting, sipping from a cup of mint tea, her eyes full of fire. Stepped down. Emma nodded. Catherine smiled. "I always told him the empire wouldn't last if he forgot how to say please." Emma chuckled. "I thank you." "I was wrong," Catherine added. Emma looked toward the trees. "I wasn't trying to destroy what he built." "No," Catherine said. You were trying to heal it. She reached over and placed her hand over Emma's. You're not just a healer, sweetheart. You're the cure. Emma's throat tightened. It wasn't praise. It was truth. And for the first time in her life, Emma didn't shrink from it. She sat with it and let herself be seen. Chapter 9. The rooftop again. The first time she stood here, it was raining, her shoes were wet, her hands shook, her heart was carrying too much, and she let silence carry the rest. This time, the sky was clear. Emma leaned against the rooftop ledge of Hale Memorial, now part of the newly renamed Win Hale Healing Center. The name wasn't her idea. Catherine insisted, so had the board. Richard hadn't even asked, he just printed it on the first draft and waited to see if she'd notice. She did. But tonight she let it be. Below, the city glowed, soft and gold, like candlelight poured into glass. It felt quieter here, even with all that noise beneath them. Or maybe she had finally learned how to stand still inside herself. What's behind her? She didn't turn. Richard joined her at the edge. He kept a respectful distance, close enough to share air, far enough not to presume. I wondered if you'd be here, he said. I always come here when I'm between who I was and who I'm becoming. He nodded. I know the feeling. Emma looked at him, really looked. No longer the boy from Vermont with big hands and unsure eyes. No longer the quiet heir to a ruthless man. But this was someone else. Or maybe this was who he'd always been, once the weight of his father had finally been set down. You gave them the file, she said. He nodded. They're opening a full investigation into the trial division. Shutting it down, Catherine's transferring funds to start a community drink and research center, with your name on the cornerstone. She let that sit a moment, then asked quietly, why didn't you fight for me back then? Richard turned his face to the wind. I was afraid, he said, afraid of losing the future my father had already chosen for me. Now, I'd burn it all, he said, if it meant I got to start over with you. She looked away, not because she didn't believe him, but because part of her wanted to, and that terrified her. I'm not a symbol, Richard. I know. I'm not a case study, or a savior, or your redemption arc. I know. I'm a woman who learned how to live after being erased. He nodded slowly. I'm a man trying to love you without making you small. She went quiet again. The city breathed beneath them. Say it, she whispered. He looked over. Say what? What you meant to say to the girl in the garden 10 years ago, before I left. He turned to her, his voice low. I didn't know how to hold you without hurting you, but I never stopped wishing I could. Emma swallowed. I used to wait for those words, she said. I don't anymore. He nodded. Then let me say them for me, not for you. A long pause. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled something out, the sketchbook. Worn, soft, familiar. She opened to a page he hadn't seen in years. A heart. Not anatomical, just 2 lines curved together, a beginning. She handed him a pen. He stared at it, and down at the page. And without speaking, he drew a second heart, slightly smaller, fitted inside the first, not overtaking, just existing beside it. Emma watched him, and then closed the book. You're still not forgiven, she said. I don't expect to be. You're not erased either. He exhaled something small, something light. Then we start from here. They stood there a long while, not holding hands, not kissing, just existing, fully. 2 people on a rooftop. Bling breathing, beating. Beginning again. Chapter 10. I don't sweep anymore. Emma didn't wake up to an alarm anymore. She didn't sweep floors. She didn't wear shoes with soles worn thin by 12-hour shifts and silent. Instead, she poured coffee from a ceramic French press, a gift from Catherine, and stood at her kitchen window, barefoot, watching the morning unfold in shades of gold. Outside, the sign across the street had just gone up: Win Healing Collaborative, grand opening Monday. She'd designed the space herself. Open rooms, low lighting, chairs that didn't squeak, exam tables with warmth, no clipboards, just conversation, and windows. So people like her could see the sun while being seen. Her phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Be you nervous?" She typed back. "Any more? Want company?" She didn't answer for a minute. Then sent. "Me after." The ribbon cutting was quiet. No camera crews, no shareholders, no champagne flutes. Just neighbors, nurses, a few patients who remembered her as the girl with the mop who asked the right questions. Catherine gave the welcome speech. She stood with a cane now, but her voice was steady. "I'm not here because I survived," she said. "I'm here because someone saw something worth saving and didn't ask for permission to save it." Emma stood beside her, hands in the pockets of her linen coat, heart calm. When the ribbon fell, the crowd clapped, but Emma didn't flinch. She smiled, genuinely. Afterward, a young girl, maybe 10, with freckles and untied laces, tapped her arm. "Are you the doctor?" Emma knelt. "Not the kind you're thinking of." "Then what kind?" "The kind who listens." The girl grinned. "That's the best kind." Emma didn't cry, but something inside her softened, like a scar finally fading. Richard arrived at dusk. She was alone in the main room, standing beneath the skylight. A stack of hand-stitched cushions waited by the windows. The scent of eucalyptus lingered in the air. He leaned in the doorway. "I saw your interview," he said. Emma turned. "I didn't know it was being filmed." "You said something." He smiled faintly. "You said, 'I don't sweep anymore. I make space.'" Emma nodded. He stepped closer. "I want to help." She raised an eyebrow. "You already helped?" "Only with time," he said. "I mean, really help. Quietly. Not with logos or foundation plaques, just with hands. With time." She studied him. "You know what that means, right?" He nodded. "It means learning, and being uncomfortable. Think slowly." "I can do slow." Emma looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she asked. "Because the life I built without you was loud and empty." She didn't move. She continued, "And this place? It feels like a beginning, like something I don't want to miss." Emma exhaled. "You'll be sweeping again," she warned. "I hope so." She smiled. "You'll be making tea, folding blankets, holding silence." "I've gotten good at silence." She laughed once, quiet and real. Then said the simplest thing. "Okay?" And that was enough. That night, they stayed late. Emma watered the lavender. Richard organized books by height, then color, then gave up and put them all back. He didn't try to kiss her. She didn't try to make him. But when he reached for the broom leaning in the corner, the one she kept not for use but for memory, she let him. He swept the floors of her new beginning, and she let him. Because healing doesn't always end in triumph. Sometimes it ends in peace, the pulse that never left. The waiting room at Win Healing wasn't large. It didn't have sleek branding, no touchscreen check-ins, no sterile lavender-scented candles. Instead, it had soft chairs, old rugs, pale sunlight, and a radio, the kind that crackled and hummed, tuned always to the same jazz station Catherine liked to call the sound of breathing in between. Emma sat at the front desk one morning, legs tucked beneath her, sipping tea. Across from her, a woman with salt-gray hair wiped tears from her cheeks. "I don't know why I'm crying," the woman whispered. "No one's even said anything yet." Emma smiled gently. "Sometimes being seen is enough." The woman nodded. Feels like the first time I've breathed in months. Emma offered her a tissue. She didn't offer advice. Didn't fix anything. Just stayed. Present. Because that's what she had learned. But that healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about sitting with it long enough to know its name, and soft enough not to be afraid of its sound. Later that evening, Emma walked the halls alone. She paused in front of the framed photo on the wall. It was black and white, faded. A nurse in the 1960s, kneeling beside a woman in a shelter, both of them laughing, their hands clasped, no one looking at the camera, just each other. Catherine and her mother. Emma touched the frame with quiet reverence. "You stayed," she whispered. "And I stayed too." Behind her, Richard's voice came, soft as breath. "I thought staying meant standing still, but you taught me it means walking forward and not walking alone." She turned. He was holding a folder. "New proposal," he said. "Mobile units, health vans, bringing the clinic to those who can't come here." Emma smiled. "Where did that idea come from?" He tapped his heart. "Let them were steady." She nodded. It then turned off the light. And together they left. Not as hero and savior. Not as CEO and healer. Just two people, walking out into the dusk, carrying something they once thought they'd lost and chose to hold again. A pulse. It's a rhythm. It's a future. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to wait your turn, this story is for you. If you've ever loved someone in silence or carried a legacy no one else saw, this story is for you. Healing doesn't come from being perfect, it comes from being present. We hope this story reminded you. You don't need to shout to matter. You don't need permission to show up. You only need to choose to stay. And if this story touched something quiet in you, we invite you to share it, not for us, but for the next woman who needs to hear. I don't sweep anymore. I make space.